Alright, welcome to exercise 6. We're in type 1, and for this exercise we're going to work with the type tool, specifically point type, and then we're also going to be working with the character panel. The type tool, we can access this with the T key. We'll access the type tool. This is what you use to make type and text. There's two different ways of creating type. The first way is point type. So let me demonstrate that right now. I'm going to click just once with the type tool, and it gives me by default just two words of what's called dummy text, and it's usually some kind of weird form of Latin. So I'll go ahead and type my name, and to exit using the type tool, hit the escape key. Now it has a bounding box just like our other objects, and if I hold down on the shift key and move that type bounding box, you'll see I'm sizing it. Move the bounding box on the right hand side, you can see that I can squash the text both vertically and horizontally, and I have a lot of free reign for adjusting this. So this is point type. This is the kind of type that you use for titles, for any kind of mastheads, or just one lines of text that you want to modify. The other type of text is called area type. So I'll access the type tool again, and this time instead of clicking once, I'm going to click and drag and then release. Now when I do that, I'm actually getting multiple lines of dummy text, and it's filling the box with that dummy text. I'll hit the escape key, and now when I size the bounding box, it's not changing the proportions and size of the text itself, it's just changing the container that holds the text. So if I make it really small, it's just giving me a small window into multiple lines of type. If I expand it, it will go out to the original size of the box. We will work with these two kinds of type in the following exercise. The other thing we're going to work with is what's called the character panel. So again, I'm going to click once with the type tool and just type my name. I'll hit the escape key and increase the size. And if I look up here in the control panel, I do have options for the character panel that are already here. So I can change the typeface. If I click on here, I can see I have access to many different kinds of typefaces. And so we'll go through this real quick. So what we're looking at here is the name of the typeface. Right next to it is a star. So these are actually fully customizable lists that you can develop of your own fonts that you prefer, of your favorite fonts. And if I click right up here on this star after I've made my favorite choices, I can actually get just a limited list of all of my favorite typefaces. If I click the star again, it will go back to the long list of system fonts. So right next to the name of the font is a little symbol. It's either an O or a double T. The O is what's called open type. So this means that this type will work with both the Mac OS X operating system, and it will also work with Windows operating system. The double T means that this is a common text that is used for print. And so next to that, you get a small preview as to what the text looks like. If I choose a text, so let's say I choose Avenir, and then I will go back and actually come right next to the star. There's another symbol, and it looks kind of like an equal sign with the curve, so like equivalent to. If I click on this, I'm going to get typefaces that are very similar, or what the computer sees as being very similar to the text that I originally chose. So now I'm getting all the different kinds of Avenir along with other typefaces that have similar proportions and similar characteristics. I'll go ahead and unclick that one. The other thing I wanted to show you when you work with type is if you select your point type and then you start going through the typefaces, you can actually see it changing in this live preview. So that's another way of choosing your type. I'll go ahead and choose something that is pretty standard. I'm sure everyone has Helvetica. I'll go ahead and choose that one. Okay, so Helvetica is the typeface, and next to that I have the type family. And so these are all different versions of Helvetica. We can have a light version in which the outline is thinner and lighter. We have our light oblique, we have regular, and then we have bold. So each font has different versions that come along with it, and so you want to make sure that after you choose a text that you you know which part of the type family you're using, because sometimes you choose a font and you might not know that there are different versions of that font you could be using. There's also the size of the font right next to that. So this is the point size. You can toggle that. But a better way to work with your point type is to use the character panel. And I can access that using Command and T, or I can go into the window menu and find under type character. And so you should see a window that looks like this. Just so you know, sometimes it doesn't give you all the options. So if you're not seeing some of these other things, just come in here and make sure that show options is clicked. So we have the typeface, we have the font style, we have the size, okay? Then we also have what's called the leading, so that's the space between the lines. We have the kerning, which is the space between the letters, and then we also have tracking, which is almost essentially the same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and play around a little bit with the tracking. So I'm just kind of toggling this up, and I can see that it's increasing the space between the characters, and then I'll go down, and now it's decreasing the space between the characters. There's a really nice shortcut to do this with a selected point type. You can hold down on the Alt key, and you can hold down on the right and left arrow keys, and you can see that adjusting the tracking in real time. We can also extend the vertical scale and the horizontal. We can change the what's called the baseline. So the baseline is usually a standard line that all the text or all the fonts line up to. So if I start going up and down on this baseline, it's going to change where it is along the baseline. Now to show a better example of this, I'm going to go ahead and double click inside the point type, and then I'll click and hold down, and I will select just the first name. Then I'll come over to my character panel, and I'm going to adjust my baseline down. And now I can see that only this selected characters are shifting down while these other ones are remaining locked onto that first baseline. And the other thing you can do is you can rotate the characters. So I'll go ahead and just choose this first character of my last name, B, and I'm actually going to change the rotation. I change that to 45 degrees, and if I wanted to, I could bring that back. I'll go ahead and hit the escape key to get out of this selection mode, and I'll show a few more things we can work with the character panel. We can click this option right here with the 2 capital T's to change it to all caps. Right next to that is what's called small caps. So the first capital letters are bigger and the next ones are smaller. I can also add what's called a super and subscript. So if I were to come in here, I'll double click next to my name and I'll put the number 1 and I'll select that over here, and I'll hit the superscript, and you can see that decreases the size and it bumps it up the baseline. Go ahead and change that to a 2. It's a little easier to see. I could also do a subscript, which moves it down below. I can underline my type. If I select that first name and hit underline, get a nice bar that matches with the point size of the text. I'll go ahead and select my last name, and I'll do the strike through. We've gone over most of what we can do with the character panel. So go ahead and hit the escape key to exit that. And let's go ahead and try to make this set of characters. And we're going to use all the features that we can in the character panel for this. I'll go ahead and hit T for the type tool. I'll click once, and we can see it has the settings of what we were doing before with this other part. So I'll go ahead and turn those off. You can also come up into the options panel and say reset panel. So it reset to that default text. And I'll go into my character panel and find a font that has a serif so we can see a little bit more of what we're working with as far as the proportions. So, and I think I'm going to work with Perpetua. That's a pretty common typeface. So Perpetua, and in this case I'm going to work with Perpetua Bold, and I'll go ahead and type in E equals MC2. All we need to put in right now. I'll hit the escape key, and I'll go ahead and increase that size. And I'm just gonna roughly line this up with what's on the template. I'll double click inside, and I'll start by selecting the E, and I will increase that size. Okay. Seems about right. And I'll take this MC squared, and I'm going to adjust the baseline. So I'll bring that up. I'll hit the escape key, I'll go ahead and move that back, and I'll double click inside again and highlight the 2, and I will change that to a superscript. Okay, so now that I have that close to completion, I'm going to go ahead and create this other one. So I'm going to go ahead and change the size of my font to 48, and I'll hit T for the type tool. I'll go ahead and click once, and then I'll type the best way to find your face energy. And I'm going to come up here to the control panel, and we'll go over working with the paragraph panel, but for now I'm going to change the alignment from align left to align center, and then I'll move that back. I'll go ahead and change this type into small caps, and I'll bring down the size a little bit so that it roughly matches the template. Okay, so now I need to make the word energy larger. It's a little hard to select, so you gotta go way down here. There we go. And I'll go ahead and increase the size. And you can see as I increase it, it's not adjusting the leading or the space between. So with it selected, I'm going to increase the leading, and I'll increase the size more, increase the leading, and now I will adjust the tracking or the space between. Go ahead and try 200 for the tracking. That's just about there. I'll increase the size a little bit more, and I'll increase the leading, and that looks about right. I have a 94 point size for the font. I got a 65 point leading and a 200 tracking. Cool, I like that. I'll hit the escape key. I'll come back to this MC squared and do some more modifications. I'll go ahead and double click, and for this equal sign, I'm going to decrease the size a little bit, and I will increase the baseline shift. Go ahead and select the MC, and I'll put an underline on that. I will select the E, and I will start to adjust the rotation. It looks about right. Increase the size just a little bit more. I'll hit the escape key, and I'll just go ahead and move that back into place. Almost about what we have with the template. Maybe I'll decrease the rotation on that a little bit more. Hit the escape key. Alright, so now that we have most of our type and characters in place, let's go ahead and put in these symbols. These are actually called glyphs. And so glyphs are just special characters and symbols that come along with each typeface or font family. So in order to get to the glyphs, I'm going to go up to Window, Type, and look for glyphs. Your set of glyphs depends on the type font or typeface that you're using. I'm going to go ahead and click once again to get my dummy text, and if you guys can, try to see if you have Athelas. If not, try to find something similar to that, so I'll go ahead and click on it. If that doesn't work, just try to find something with Times New Roman or Times. Okay, so the first thing I'm looking for is these bullets or dots. So I went ahead, I'm in Times right now. I'm going to scroll down and find one of these large bullets, and I'll double click on that. You can see it added it to my type selection. I'll double click again and double click one more time. Okay, so now that I have those glyphs, I'll go ahead and use my black arrow, and I'll increase the size of those, and I think I'll decrease the size a little bit more. I'll access my character panel, so Command T, and I'll change the tracking to, let's try 200 again. Alright, I like that. So I'll click my black arrow, and now I can just move those into place. And the last thing I need is some kind of star symbol at the top. See if it's actually here in the Times New Roman. So all the way down here in the bottom, there's an asterisk. I'm going to choose that one. So I'll use my type tool, and I'll click once to get my dummy text. And I'll just go ahead and double click on that asterisk while it's still selected. And then when I like what I have, I'll hit the escape key, and I'll just increase the size of that. Go ahead and move it. And that should be about right. Alright, cool. So we're almost done with our small type composition. I'm going to go ahead and select all the type that we've just created. I'm going to close my glyph panel, and I'll change the color to this dark red. And then I'll go ahead and put a circle background on here just to frame it. So I'll switch the stroke and the fill, and I'll choose a yellow fill. I'll go ahead and arrange that to the back, and I'll increase the size of that stroke. Yeah, I think about 10 points would be fine. Alright, so we have a little bit of practice now on working with point type and working with the character